Today we're going to talk about when to use usted versus tú in Spanish and not how you learned it in your Spanish school. Welcome to How to Expat. My name is Sam and usually on this channel we talk about how to move to Colombia. Today I want to talk about a Spanish lesson, so when to use usted versus tú. If you learned that in your Spanish school, you most probably learned that you use usted for formal situations and tú for informal, more personal situations. But unfortunately, the rule is not that easy. Actually, it's not even correct if you use it that way. So in this video, we'll check it out how it actually is, because I found out after a couple of years living in Colombia how it really applies to daily life here with the locals. So if your native tongue is English, you might not even have that concept, but in many different languages you use formal and informal ways to talk with each other. And in Spanish is, as I said, usted and tú. In German, for example, we have a very straight line where the difference is taken. So it's either if it's formal, you use usted, or if it's informal, tú. Here in Latin America, it's a little bit different, because one thing I found out is that people here actually use the formal, so usted, for kids and pets. So that really didn't make sense in my mind. This is like talking to a pet or a kid is the most informal thing there is. But still, there are people here, especially more traditional people, that use the usted form there. So the rule of informal and formal doesn't really apply there, and actually doesn't really apply in general. So I tried to give it my best shot here to explain how it is. Unfortunately, there is not really a rule. You just have to figure it out by yourself. It took me around 2 years to really figure it out, but now it's second nature. So I give it my best try to explain it. So usted you use, I give it an example. With my buddies, once a week I play soccer, so football in Spanish. With them, and I would never even talk to them in the tú form. I always use usted. And that's because especially men here in the part of Colombia where I live, they have kind of a boundary between how they talk to each other. And because you use usted with them, even it's a very informal situation, you play with each other soccer, so you have seen each other a couple of times, but you would never use tú, because you kind of keep that personal space between each other. So that's why you use the usted form. And this is really where the key is, understanding when to use usted and tú. If you want to maintain that kind of gap between each other, you use usted, no matter if it's a formal or an informal situation. A different example I have is on a job interview I had here with the current job I'm now working on. I used the tú form, and that's because I wanted to give an impression of somebody being more trustworthy, being close. So I closed that artificial gap people sometimes have here with the tú form to kind of, in a way, show my underbelly and show that I'm a trustworthy person, and yeah, to give a better impression of myself in the job interview. So again, this was a very formal situation, but I used the informal tú. And talking with locals, they do the exact same thing. So it's kind of not really the rule you learn. So it's more about having or reducing that gap in the specific situations. And now it makes sense with the kids and the pets, right? So if sometimes even in English, you want to have that gap between, especially if you're more traditional, with your kids. So your kid would reply something like, or you would ask, did you clean up your room? And the kid would say, sir, yes, I did, or something like that, even to your parents. So that's the same thing. So sometimes more traditional people here in Colombia, they will use the usted form for the kids to have kind of this respect boundary, so this gap I'm always talking about in this video, this gap between them. So now it makes sense. Also, that's the thing with the pets. So some people see pets like, oh, it's little pets, they will usually use tú. But the ones that see the pet more like as an animal, they are more likely to use usted to talk to the pet. So there are different ways with this kind of gap, with this boundary. You can use it on the same level, like I did with the job interview or with my friends. You can use it down, so you put that gap between you and a pet or a child. Or you could also give that gap above you, let's say. So to elderly people or to parents of friends or something, you will offer, or you will say the usted form to acknowledge that you have respect for that person because they're elderly or they have a different social structure, or however you want to call it. But you can give them that, and that means it's respectful. So these are the ways you kind of play with that gap where you use usted versus tú. And actually here in a couple of parts of Latin America, especially here in Medellin in Colombia, you have even another form which is called VOS. So I actually kind of lied to you when I said that with my friends in soccer I use the usted form. Of course, sometimes I do with people I don't know too much, not the regular people that are there, but with the regulars I have a little bit deeper connection. I use the VOS form. So it's not to be mistaken with the vosotros form. It's really a special form that just in a couple of parts of Latin America is present. Here in Medellin is one of them. So I use the VOS form for people for other men that I have a more specific connection, but still I would never use tú with them. It's kind of very, very personal. It feels wrong saying tú to the people I play soccer with. It's hard to explain, but again, it has to do with that kind of gap. So this was mostly the rule for men. If you're a female, like a woman, it's more they use more the tú form instead of the usted. So they close that kind of gap usually men have between each other. They close that way earlier. So it's very common that women use usted just for respect people, I don't know, talking with the police, with an elderly person, with grandmas, grandpas or something like that. But between friends, they pretty quickly close that gap to tú. So this was the general rule, how I see it here in Medellin. You have to know though that how this rule is applied differentiates a lot between the different regions. So even if you're in Colombia in a different region, let's say the coast of Colombia, where things are a little bit more laid back, a little bit more easygoing than here in the Andes, here in Medellin or in Bogota, they offer or they close that gap also quite quickly. So hearing usted is way less prevalent on the coast here in Colombia, where things are a little bit easier compared to the Andes here in Colombia. And other parts in Latin America, usually like the Dominican Republic and all of those, they close that gap also very, very quickly. So it's more prevalent to hear the tú form in those kinds of areas as well. So it really depends where you're living. But I hope with this video I could kind of show you the difference between how you usually learn it in the Spanish school, which doesn't really make sense, which I think only applies around like for 50% of the cases, to what it actually is, at least for me here in Colombia. Yes, that was already it for this video. If you want to see more videos about Spanish, we usually have Violeta, our amazing Spanish teacher, here on the channel talking about different things you have to know about Colombian Spanish or Spanish in general. Otherwise, if you want to see more videos about Colombia, make sure to subscribe. See you in the next video.